We're now halfway through the year, so it's obviously time for me to talk about my favourite books from the last quarter, which obviously includes the months April, May, and June. I actually initially thought I would not have enough books to talk about for this video because I haven't rated a book 4 stars or more literally since the middle of May, and considering how we're literally in the middle of July now, that's almost 2 months. But I still miraculously still have 6 books to talk about, and I realise it's because I pretty much read the majority of them at the very start of the quarter. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you about them, and all the books I rated here are 4 stars and above, and I'm going to be listing them in order of preference. So stick around to the end of the video to find out what was my favourite book from the last 3 months. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm Katerina. I pretty much talk about books on this channel, and if that's something you're into, why not subscribe? Okay, so kicking off, the very first book I have is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. This is a post-apocalyptic horror novel where a pandemic has occurred that has basically transformed everyone into vampires. And we follow the perspective of the last known survivor essentially grapple with this despair and loneliness from being the last one left. And whilst enduring these very bleak circumstances, he's also trying to find a cure to bring everyone back. And I rated this book 4 stars, which I was genuinely very surprised with. And I'm surprised with it because I thought this book was going to be like the film. I thought it was going to be very moody and dark and follow a quite boring, stoic guy as he fights off zombies. But the source material was completely different. It was actually really funny. It had this like satirical comedic edge to it, which I genuinely didn't expect. Probably because it was written in the 1950s, so they just kind of viewed the supernatural back then as more ridiculous. Because it's written with this air of what's happening is so wild that it's actually kind of hilarious. And the main character isn't some well-prepared guy with military background and genius thinking. He's more of your average Joe who just looked out on not being infected when bitten. And I like this writing choice because he came across as someone more relatable, someone you as a reader could actually visualize yourself as. Unless you do have military training and genius thinking, which I can say securely that I definitely do not. There's also a character in this book that really made me laugh whenever he cropped up. I would say he's like the equivalent of Ned Flanders in The Simpsons, in that the main character just gets so annoyed by him just because of how purely irritating he is. And it just really made me giggle because I'm sure we all have that one neighbor who would just like to whenever we see them. But probably my favorite thing about this whole book is probably the ending. I won't give any spoilers, but it just felt very full circle and satisfying without being predictable, and that was something that I was genuinely impressed with. Reading this also made me realize we need more new books of vampires. Twilight can't be the latest book that I read that's about vampires. I need new material. But moving swiftly on before I actually start fangirling about Twilight too much, my next book is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates, which is a completely different vibe, so I do apologise for bringing the tone slightly down. But this is a very important book, and I actually picked this book up after I finished watching Netflix's Adolescence due to the themes explored. I actually made a whole video about books to read after finishing that show, which I'll link down below if you want to watch. But in this book, the author discusses issues of misogyny within modern society, and she particularly zones in on online communities that are fostering and promoting hate towards women. By making a fake profile pretending to be a man, she probes into the darkest corners of the internet and studies groups such as incels, pickup artists, and men's rights activists, and witnesses how this online hate more often than not translates into real life violence. And I rated this book 4.5 stars because genuinely it kind of terrified me. One of the reasons I deleted Twitter this year, I refuse to call it X because I think that's such a loser name, is because after Elon Musk took over, I was genuinely very concerned about the sheer amount of misogynistic content I was seeing in my For You page. I felt like the whole algorithm had changed to cater towards incels, particularly right-wing misogynistic ones, which to be honest kind of goes hand in hand anyway. And when I first told people this, I got comments of being like, oh, it's only a small pocket of the internet, it doesn't really affect anything in real life. But the show Adolescence was so good because it showcases that no, it does affect real life audiences, especially younger ones who are more susceptible to these sort of things. And I think this book did a really great job in shedding light on these groups and raising awareness of them, and how easily it can be for men to join these groups without realizing its full impact. Not by immediately hating women, but by using things like the male loneliness epidemic to kind of lure them in, and then hating women kind of comes as a byproduct from that. I also just think that the author did a great job in emphasizing the seriousness of this issue that's going on right now, and showing how these growing online communities actually do produce real life violence. It's kind of horrifying turning on the news and seeing every other day an act of violence that a man has done towards a woman. It's too common. This book is a very important read and one that I would definitely recommend to anyone to read. I would say if you're a woman, it can be particularly heavy. I was struggling to get through some points. So I would say proceed with caution if you want to pick it up, but it is still a vital read and I would recommend it to anyone. For my next book, this is also one that I was pleasantly surprised with, and that's Bad Habit by Alana Portero. And I read the translated version by Mara Faye Letham, as this novel is originally Spanish. This is a coming-of-age novel that's set in Madrid in the 1980s and 90s, and we follow a trans woman growing up in a working-class area, and she comes into contact with various struggles, including gender identity, societal expectations, and her search for belonging in a patriarchal and transphobic world, all of which is happening during a time of the heroin epidemic and changing cultural attitudes. And I rated this book 4.5 stars because it was genuinely an absolutely stunning read. I adored the prose in this novel. It was very beautiful but also incredibly sad at the same time. It very much reminded me of novels like My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante and The Queens of Sarmiento Park by Camila Sosa Villada kind of mashed in together. I particularly enjoyed the social commentary on gender roles, especially how women have to navigate this man's world. And it's cool that this novel spanned over many decades, so you can see how these cultural attitudes were shifting through time. I also just love the characters. I wanted to hug every single one of them. They were all just so precious to me. And I like that that was the messaging of the book, of the importance of who you surround yourself with. As these women, including the trans women, is what gave this main character the courage to be herself. And I would just say that this is just a gorgeous homage to sisterhood, and it is one of the many beautiful things about being a woman. The idea that women have your back purely because you are also a woman and they understand the common struggles that we all go through in life. And it also makes this story as equally as devastating because these characters face so much pain and trauma, and it's purely based on this flimsy and silly construct that we call masculinity and what apparently that should entail. I just love this book. I went in with zero expectations and I was genuinely so pleasantly surprised by the end. I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but this is the closest that a novel has truly allowed me to understand what being trans is like. And for my next book, this is one that I actually already had high expectations for, and they were definitely met, if not exceeded, and that was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I'm going to be speaking vaguely about the sensitive topics here because I don't want YouTube to censor my video. I'm going to hope for the best because I don't know until I literally upload the video to YouTube, so if you see an advert before this, then you'll know I was successful. The story follows a 15-year-old girl who becomes involved with her middle-aged English teacher after he instigated the relation, to the point where they become so involved they enter a secret relationship together. And years later, she still fully believes that this was done out of good intentions and pure, sincere love. But it's not until other victims come out afterwards that she realizes the extent of the abuse. And I rated this book 5 stars because this genuinely left me speechless. I would describe this book as watching a car crash in real time. What's about to happen is so horrific to the point where I genuinely felt physically sick when reading this, but because you're so involved in the mess of the aftermath, you can't help but still look. And it's a weird one because even though that the story is fictional, it's still a real story for countless of girls and even boys who have gone through similar things, who have put their trust and sincere feelings to someone in a position of responsibility for them to only be harmed at the end, which is one of the most horrifying but also memorable things about this book, is that it feels so real and it has happened to people. I just feel like this was the most impactful book I've ever read that has truly allowed me to understand the meaning and the extent of being a victim. And her point of view when she was young particularly just felt so real, like the innocence and vulnerability and confusion that comes from this age, but also her denial and anger as she's an older woman looking back at this time is so heartbreaking. This is an incredible read, but also a very heavy one that I don't think everyone has the stomach for. So I would proceed with caution and definitely check the trigger warnings before you pick up this book. But if you do want to read it, I would definitely recommend you do because this will definitely stay with you. You can also just tell that the author put her absolute soul into this piece of work, and I finished it feeling incredibly somber. Like, I liked it, but also was so sad by it and would recommend it to other people, but also would never read it again myself. it's kind of one of those books. And before this video gets too heavy, let's talk about my second favourite book from the last quarter, which I promise is definitely a lot more fun, and that's Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. In this story, we follow the tumultuous journey of a couple's troubled marriage. The wife disappears on their 5th wedding anniversary, and the husband becomes prime suspect. And as hidden agendas start popping up, the media frenzy intensifies and the investigation just spirals. And of course, I gave this 5 stars because literally, how could I not? It's incredible. I feel like I've spoken about this book so much recently on my channel since I read it, so I can only apologize if this is like the 10th time you're hearing about it. But it's so good, and particularly the 2 things that make it stand out is the plot and the social commentary. Both these things really make it shine. The plot just has so many twists and turns in it that I genuinely didn't expect what was going to be happening next. You think you've sussed out the couple in one chapter, but then they end up doing something so completely unhinged by the next, you're literally just like, what the hell? And it's not one of those annoying novels that just adds in wild plot lines at the end just purely for shock value. All of the actions here felt very real given the characters' backgrounds and genuinely felt very believable. And I think it's because the author did such a great job in conveying the characters' psychological depth and background to you as the reader, that you could follow along and understand where they were coming from. And as mentioned, the social commentary here is just absolutely unparalleled. She really hones in on the intricate dynamics of couples, especially married couples, and the specific problems that they face. And because it switches between the husband and the wife's POV throughout the book, you really understand both sides here. I just love this book. It was so gripping and fast-paced. It absolutely had me hooked. And I've already watched the film, like I've seen it like a decade ago, but the plot was kind of hazy to me, but I was still floored by the book, even when I knew all the twists and turns that were coming. It's just such a good one, and it's definitely one to read if you want a book where you literally don't want to put it down and just read it from cover to cover. This is one for you. And finally, my final book in this list, which was actually my favourite book overall from the last quarter, was The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This book is actually super short. It's only like 100 odd pages or so. And here Baldwin has written 2 essays that explore racial issues, predominantly the Black experience within America. And this was written in light of it being exactly 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The first essay is addressed to James Baldwin's nephew, and it's written kind of like a letter that explores the harsh realities of being born Black within the US. And the second is just James Baldwin's own musings and experiences regarding religion and race, with a focus on how both Christianity and Islam play a part in contributing to racial oppression. And once again, 5 stars, obviously. I feel silly even having to state that. After this book, which I think is my 4th James Baldwin book now, this has just cemented him in being one of my favourite authors of all time. Quite potentially my top 3 authors. Don't ask me who the other 2 are, I don't know, but I just know he's up there in that top 3. I just love his ability to capture very specific societal observations that I feel like go widely unnoticed, whilst at the same time addressing it to you as the reader in a very digestible way to understand, but still being engaging and not preachy. For me particularly, my favourite part of the book was how he explored religion, particularly Islam, in a way that hinders civil rights progress. I found that incredibly eye-opening. And I love his ability to shed light on very sensitive topics in a non-judgmental way. And I find it incredibly rare, especially when reading non-fiction, when authors can talk about such topics in a way that isn't preachy or condescending. James Baldwin is just a master at this. Like, he just writes things in the most beautifully delicate way where I actually just end up feeling existential about it, because obviously these essays explore how we still live in an era of unbelievable racial injustice. And reading this book now, which is 50 years after it was published, is even more wild given how relevant the content is still today. I just devoured this book. I know it's short, but I literally read it in one sitting. I just find his writing so entrancing. It's kind of like listening to a really good song. Like, you're hooked in from the first beat and you literally can't stop it until you've gone all the way to the end. I would honestly read that man's shopping list. I think everything he writes is just pure gold. And on that absolutely solid note of praise, those were all my favourite books from the last quarter. What were your favourite books from the past 3 months? Let me know in the comments below, because I really do love reading your guys' recommendations. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like down below, and if you're new here but you like my content, why not subscribe? I make a lot of videos chatting about books. Feel free to also follow me on Goodreads. I update there what I read in real time, and also feel free to follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post the books I've read, letting you know know what they're about and what I rate them out of 10. And I need to head off now because I'm going to a birthday party, which is why I've got a full face of makeup on. I love you guys, but I can never be asked doing a full face of makeup for YouTube videos, which is why I'm now looking more glamorous today than usual. But that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. I love you, and I shall hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!